Tim Keller is an influential and accomplished evangelist and preacher. A few years ago, he sat down for a discussion with Russell Moore and Ligon Duncan, and the conversation briefly turned to how to approach the issue of creation, including evolution, with unbelievers. How did they do? So to start with, I attended Tim Keller's church for a time, about 25 years ago, and it was a time of spiritual growth for me. I've also been praying for him as he deals with his current serious health issue. Now let's get right to it. I like some of what he says here in this video. I don't agree so much with what his conversation partners say. I'll play the video and stop to respond.
The Bible obviously starts with God's creation of the universe and continues with the theme of God as creator all the way through. I'm wondering if we think about the essentials, about what's necessary to be believed, what's necessary to be said. First of all, I wonder when you're talking to unbelievers, you're talking to people on the outside who might not have really any conception of the Christian faith, what, if anything, should we bring up when we're talking about issues of creation?
Good question. Well, among other things, that we believe in an awesome, all-powerful, yet personal God that created everything and sustains all creation. And the Bible teaches that God created, not how God created. Let's see what Tim says.
Well, I think you need to stress the relationship of God to the creation. There's an awful lot of folks now that are, they wouldn't call themselves pantheists, but there's a lot of people when they say they're religious, they're not religious, they're spiritual. And they have a sense of wonder about the world, and they know there's more to it and than just this material world, and they consider that a kind of spirituality. If you push them a little bit, it really they do not believe that there was a God who existed before the universe and created the material universe as a work of art. You know, Proverbs 8 actually says he was delighting. In humankind as he was making us, and so the idea that you have a personal God who makes us as in delight, as but he exists before the world, he's transcendent above the world, he creates the world. That's extraordinarily important. Also, the world is not an accident. It's also not the result of the forces of an evil and a good force coming together, but it was all good.
Okay, Tim has vast experience dealing with young people who come with secular mindsets and from spiritual but non-Christian backgrounds. We should listen to this perspective. I think a lot of what he says is good. Then he makes a key point, and I want to pause on it for a moment.
All those things need to be stressed, and it's not usually, even where the non-believer wants to go, they actually want to talk about evolution and creation right away.
Right.
Because they believe they want to talk about religion, creation as a religion versus science battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they do, because they think and have been told that there is a conflict there. And they may be open to Christianity, but not if it requires believing something they know is false. It can be a crossroads for a lot of people. So what does Tim suggest?
You want to go back and say, let me give you all the reasons why Augustine actually said.
Okay, I don't think a lot of unbelievers will care much about Augustine, but let's give Tim some rope here.
To the polytheists and the pagans of his day, your doctrine of creation is never going to lead to peace and justice in the world.
It's great that our view of creation can lead to peace and justice in the world, but first it has to be true.
Because you actually believe in multiple power centers and that the universe is just a result of a bunch of violent forces coming together. And he says, so I am the Christian, and I believe God made the world as a work of art out of love and joy. And he says that the Christian doctrine of creation is a basis for believing that it's possible to have a harmonious, just society. I would rather push it back to things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay, that's a great reason to want it to be true. And maybe that will convince unbelievers to dig deeper into Christianity to see if it is true. I'd still like him to let unbelievers know that evolution is compatible with Christianity. Let's see if he gets there.
Then I have to say, secondly, I say, honestly, the relationship of creation to evolution isn't the heart here. And I even say there are at least 4 or 5 or 6 different Orthodox Christian views of evolution and that sort of thing. Let's not go there first.
Well, I'll take it. especially coming from a Gospel Coalition forum. He says there are 4 to 6 different perspectives on evolution and Christianity, so this should not be your hang-up. You can pass this crossroads safely and move on. I'd prefer an affirmative argument that Christianity does not conflict with evolution, but I'll take this approach, all things considered. Then he summarizes briefly.
So first I go to the doctrine of creation, the relationship of God to creation. Then I'd rather take them to Jesus and just skip that for the time being, though I know there's some people who would say, no, you got to give them the right view of that.
Okay, let's look at how Ligon Duncan answers the question.
Yeah, and following on that, when a skeptical, intelligent unbeliever is talking to you, he, as a Christian, he probably assumes that your view of creation is an intellectual liability.
Right.
Yes, he or she likely does, unfortunately. And when some Christians hold to a young earth, that does put us at an intellectual liability, because the earth is old and evolution is a reality, and people know that.
And
Right.
so what I want to do is say, no, first of all, I want to own that. No, I actually believe this is true.
From what I've seen elsewhere, Ligon appears to believe that the world was created in 6 literal days, and very recently. If he owns that, if he doubles down on that belief in a conversation with an educated unbeliever, that would likely not go well.
And I think it's important, and I think it's compelling, and that's part of what Tim was just saying. Why is this compelling? Because my view is actually more compelling than your view is, skeptical, unbelieving friend. You know, I've got a more compelling view.
More compelling? The view that the earth is young is a total denial of science.
And then to say, and we don't think that Christianity and science are actually in conflict.
Okay, but how not, if you teach a young earth?
And, you know, there are a lot of ways that you can go about doing that. One is to say, really, Protestant Christianity very much laid the philosophical foundation for the rise of science as we know it today.
Yeah.
So I think you want to get at those kinds of things when you're talking to unbelievers.
Okay, this may not work. Pointing out that several hundred years ago, all the scientists were Christians, and Christianity supported and furthered the advancement of science, does not mean that some Christians today are not science deniers. This is actually an indictment of modern conservative Protestant Christianity. Over time, we have gone from actively and insightfully exploring God's creation to denying plain facts about it. We have gone from intellectual vitality to even cautioning our young adults against entering scientific fields of study. Now let's finish by seeing what Russell Moore has to say.
Well, I also think that there's a place for saying, I don't know. There are all sorts of questions. Well, how does Genesis intersect with quantum physics or whatever the person's interested in, to say, I don't know exactly how that relates.
Well, humility is a good thing, so I don't want to be too hard on him, but we do know some things. We know the earth is old, and we should be confident that Scripture reflects the science of the day it was written. And we know, based upon archaeological discoveries, that early Genesis seems to be in conversation with the mythologies of the surrounding cultures. And you don't need to be a scientist or a historian to understand these things. So pastors can say more than, I don't know. And with regards to quantum physics, we know how Genesis 1 interacts with quantum physics. It doesn't. Genesis 1 is not a modern scientific textbook.